So I feel that radiance is three parts. It's one part us, like our personality, who we are in this human body. It's one part our soul, and it's one part infinite intelligence, right? And the cool thing about that is that it's always available to us. Like we were born in the fullness. We were born with the fullness of that expression available to us. And that's why you see like little kids being drawn to building or playing instruments or being sport, like they naturally, it's still innate within them, and there's no separation of this is what I should do or this is what I shouldn't do. And
Mhm.
I feel within our radiance, that's where our like natural born gifts, talents, um, strengths, where our uniqueness lies.
Welcome to the Soulful Sound Podcast, where you will find conscious, inspiring content to support your healing and transformation. Now, before we jump into today's episode, I want to extend a heartfelt invitation for you to be part of our community, where more insightful conversations await to guide you to heal, grow, and thrive. Simply click the subscribe button. It means the world to me. Your support, your comments, everything is truly incredible. And we're only at the beginning of this awesome journey together. I'm so excited to be on this adventure with you, and your subscription is a valuable part of making it all happen. Thank you so much for joining, sending you love, healing, and sound wherever you are. Hey everyone, welcome back to our latest episode on the Soulful Sound Podcast. I'm joined by the beautiful Becca Powers, who is the author of A Return to Radiance and Harness Your Inner CEO, a Fortune 500 tech sales executive, keynote speaker, and the CEO of Powers Peak Potential. She has worked with industry giants Cisco, Dell, Royal Caribbean, and Office Depot, to name a few. And with an impressive record of leading large teams and hitting 500 million in annual revenue, Becca has earned the coveted President's Club Award 7 times. Woohoo! And she is a certified Kundalini teacher and Reiki master. What a wide, beautiful range of things you bring to the table, Becca. Welcome in.
Thank you. I like to consider myself multifaceted.
Yes, I think that's about right. Fabulous. Now, I'm really excited about your book. I mean, just before we jumped on live, I was saying how much synergy there is, and I'm like, oh, this and this. I got to get your take. I got to get your take. Well, I like to kind of start most of my episodes with a bit of a personal story, like what got you into this work, and of course, what got you inspired to write your book in the first place. I'd love to know your personal story.
So there's two stories intertwined in one, but I'll do my best to keep it like buttoned up. So, the cool thing about my personal story is I was born into a musical family. Both my parents were full-time musicians when I was born, and I got to grow up in what I call radiance. Like I got to see my parents in their gifts, in their talents, in their strengths, in their uniqueness, utilizing them. And as they did, there was guitars and bongos and bonfires, but more importantly, people were singing, people were happy, people were fulfilled. And so I had this experience of seeing this so early before I had the filter of what life looks like from the stress perspective, right?
Mhm.
And then as my parents got older, my mom was a manager of a Starbucks, my dad was a civil engineer, and they got further and further away from their music. And the unfortunate part, but the part of my story that I've learned so much about life and what I'm calling a return to radiance is that my parents got severely depressed the further and further they got away from their music. And my mom, unfortunately, passed away at 46 years old. And my dad passed away when he was 62 years old. And so by the time I was 35, I had lost both my parents. And which is really young to lose
Yeah.
to have such significant loss. And then, fast forward a couple years from that, I was just trying to hold it together. I was deep in grief from losing my dad. I had four kids in middle school. I was a senior manager at a corporation leading a team. And so I am doing all the things and I am bypassing probably every red flag that existed inside me. Like, I was like, oh, like my job was toxic. I was overcommitted to my family and to my responsibilities. And all I kept doing was saying yes and yes and yes and yes and no to myself ultimately. And, what really triggered this big idea was when I also went through it. So, uh, as I am going through this period of what I call just powering through, I dropped all my things that were unique to me, my passions, my purpose, all that. And I was just doing, I was just constantly in the same cycle.
Do you feel called to use your voice and sound in a healing capacity? Learn how to use your voice therapeutically to facilitate healing and well being. Whether you want to go deeper in your own healing, support family and friends, or build a thriving sound healing practice, this training is for you. This worldwide virtual training offers theory, practice, resources, and support on your path to becoming a qualified sound healer.
And one night after I had like my fourth bad day in a row, I walked in the door. My kids started, Mom, Mom, Mom. I lost my mind. I'm like, let me put down my freaking purse. And, and I exploded on them. And then I saw their little faces, like they're in middle school, but still like they went from being super happy to being like sad and like, what the hell just happened to mom? And to fast forward the story, that night when I went to bed, I was looking at myself in the mirror and I couldn't even recognize myself. Like I could still get emotional remembering like the gaze coming back at me because couldn't recognize myself. I was like, where's the spark? Where's that sparkle in my eyes? Where is she? And I didn't like who I was becoming as a mom and as a wife and as a leader. And just that all that emotional overwhelm, I collapsed on the bathroom floor. And I had one of my most powerless moments, and like people from the outside look at me and they're like, "Damn, Becca's a powerhouse." And here I am laying emotional on the bathroom floor. So I had a very spiritual experience because listen, when you're laying on the bathroom floor and you don't got strength to get up, the only way to go, like I said, the only where I had to go was up. So I call out to like God, universe, and I'm like, I need help. I can't do tomorrow the same way I'm doing today, and I only know how to do tomorrow the same way I'm doing today. And what I didn't know is that I was in extreme burnout, but at that moment when I finally called out to the universe for help, I got my instant miracle, and it came back in the form of a whisper. And it was like, Becca, you're the CEO of your life. And that thought was someone was so freaking empowering that like I rose up off the bathroom floor a different woman than the one that went down. And
Mhm.
I vowed to myself that I would never let myself hit the bathroom floor. I would try my best not to let other people hit the bathroom floor. And then I started my journey back to my radiance. And that was 2016, 2018 was the fall and the healing journey. Fast forward now, I've spent a lot of time putting framework together to help people, you know, get back to being who they are.
That is so beautiful. One of my really key moments is looking at myself in the mirror too. So I got goosebumps with that. I recall the sensation of seeing something so profound and feeling the shift, so beautiful.
Woo, I get the
Um,
goosebumps as you're saying that
I
back too.
know
I'm like, yes.
it's so great. It's so great. And I come from a musical background as well. And I love that you described music and sound and that side of things from a place of radiance because it's exactly what it is. And before we go even further into your book, I would love to know your personal definition of radiance. What is radiance?
So I feel that radiance is three parts. It's one part us, like our personality, who we are in this human body. It's one part our soul, and it's one part infinite intelligence, right? And the cool thing about that is that it's always available to us. Like we were born in the fullness. We were born with the fullness of that expression available to us. And that's why you see like little kids being drawn to building or playing instruments or being sport, like they naturally, it's still innate within them, and there's no separation of this is what I should do or this is what I shouldn't do. And
Mhm.
I feel within our radiance, that's where our like natural born gifts, talents, um, strengths, where our uniqueness lies. And those are the things that, as we are tuned into them, our radiance shines. And then as a result, when we're tapped into our radiance, there's joy, fulfillment, health, wealth, and all the things are the outcome of.
Beautiful. I love the holistic approach. I love the holistic expression of it. Completely relate. How can we separate something so interconnected, you know? So that's so beautiful. And I can't wait to dig in. What I really like about what I've been reading, because this is where I feel like my kindred spirit here in front of me, is that there's so much beautiful things that we can share that can feel sometimes expressed in not necessarily wishy-washy, but intangible ways. And when I read your work, I see how much you ground it and how much you make it so practical so everyone can grab something and do something now in this moment. And that is so important to me. And so I was like, yes, I am talking to someone who is speaking my language.
I
So,
love that.
unpotential. I've not heard that before. Talk to us about unpotential and then what we can do about it.
Yeah, so I appreciate you bringing that up because there's a lot of time and contemplation and research that went into writing this book. And when I talked about, harnessing my inner CEO, and that's the spirit that, got me up off the floor, was that empowerment. Um, I wrote that book, Harness Your Inner CEO, and it sent a wave of empowerment. So I'm going to give you a little bit of backstory, but I'm going to come back to it. And then
Yes.
those readers, I didn't even know anybody would read the book. I self-published, and I ended up with a readership of like 5,000 readers. And so it did really well. And I got a lot of feedback that's like from people saying, I feel really empowered, but now how do I overcome burnout and prevent it? And I was like, is that what it was? Because I wrote Harness Your Inner CEO before burnout was a coined phrase used every day, right? I think I only mentioned it like 3 times in the book. And if I was to write that book today, it would probably be on every page. Um, but what's interesting and how I got to Unpotential is, as I started responding to readers and going down this burnout path, I got certified in trauma awareness and in limited beliefs, and really studied burnout. And what I realized is burnout is a symptom of being disconnected from our true selves. And when I go back to Kundalini yoga and I'm going to spiritual teachings, our radiance is the final in Kundalini yoga, our radiance is the final expression of the human experience. That means we got through all the trials and we figured out our triumphs, and now we're in our radiance, right? And that's where you want to get to. And another way of saying that with Maslow's hierarchy of needs is self-actualization or reaching your full potential. So then I'm like, oh, what's really happening is all these rules we're putting on ourselves, all this powering through, it might lead to burnout or it might lead to health issues. But really, what's happening is it's disconnecting us from our potential and putting us in our unpotential. So,
Right. I love it. I love it. And burnout is one of the most common things that we all experience at some point, one shape
sure.
or form in our lives. And I know that, I mean, well, I'll come back to that actually, because the nugget that I want to go with first that will lead to that is your kind of the inner CEO. Just this weekend that passed, I was delivering a workshop to sound healers and other alternative type audience, where it was really about building a thriving practice. And we actually went into the energy of the CEO. What is the energy of that, especially when you're doing spiritual work? And sometimes you don't have that hat on if you're in the healing space and you're providing services in that way. And it was so profound. I actually got your book today because I thought, well, I want to talk about Return to Radiance, but I am definitely going to pick that one up. So I understand why so many people would have been attracted to it, because that
Hmm.
energy where we can step into our highest self and really into our, as you say, highest potential, that's going to ripple out into every area of our life.
Woo, I just got goosebumps.
Every
Yes.
area of your life. I gave them homework and I said, well, what does CEO stand for? We had creative, evolving, operative. We had all sorts of
Oh, so cool.
creatrix. We had all these different things come back. And I understand that energy is so powerful for myself. So I will definitely tap into more of that with you as we go along. So, okay, coming back to burnout, because you talk about in your book that it's really kind of like the main culprit that prevents us from rocking our radiance. So I can understand, based on what you just shared, your own experience witnessing your parents and so on, what are some of the signs that people can know, like I am really at that point where I'm experiencing burnout? Because stress can be quite common. So where's the line? Where's the burnout? What's the
I would
sign?
love to talk about that. And, in a few minutes, I could probably help the listeners very practically even understand where they might be in the
That would be
process.
wonderful.
And
Yes.
so I have the pyramid of unpotential, and it has 5 levels. But what I want to talk about first is levels 1 and 2, because when I did, I'm just going to digress for a second and come back to that. But just to give the listeners context, I surveyed about 8,000 working professionals. And in those survey results, 69% came back like what I would call active burnout. And then
Mhm.
29% were on the verge, meaning they come in and out of it, which is really common for high performers, entrepreneurs, leaders, people who are pushing a lot, but they know themselves. So they're in and out and in and out. And then you have 2% that are fully thriving. I would even put myself into the 29%. It's really hard to stay like
Yeah.
fully out because I am a high performer and I've got big goals and all that jazz. So I say that because if you find yourself in levels 1 or 2, it's pretty normal. But what's so cool is being able to identify, hey, this is where I'm at, so that you can get back into your potential real fast. So I want
Yeah.
to start with level 1, and that would be, and if you have like thoughts that come out as I'm saying this, you can pause me and we can talk about it, but I'm just going to go through the 5 levels. So
Awesome.
um level 1 is the unders. And I really wanted to create a framework that was easy to understand and, like you said, practical, that wasn't so academic or so psychology based that it was like, what the hell is everyone talking about? I'm like, no, just talk to me like a normal person.
Yeah.
So level 1, I call the unders. And this is if you're at work or at home, if you're feeling undervalued, underappreciated, underrecognized, underpaid, if you can put an under before it, that's where I say burnout or your unpotential you start to fall into your unpotential whenever you're feeling undered. And you'll know that you probably are going to not know you're undered until you're overing, which is level 2. This is the one that is so, and we can stop after I talk about that, and then we'll go into 3, 4, and 5.
Brilliant.
But the overs, what I realized when I was doing all my certifications is that from a psychological perspective or a human behavior perspective, when we feel undered, we subconsciously start overcompensating for it, because if we feel undervalued, we're going to prove that we're valuable, right?
Mhm.
If we feel underrecognized, we're going to work harder so you can be like, look, you need to recognize me, whether that's again in a relationship or at work. So listeners, if you're overing, if you're overworking, overstressing, overanalyzing, overthinking, it's normal to do these things, especially when you care about things. Also know that if you stay in that state too long, that's when you get further into your unpotential. So I always like to play a game and be like, if I'm overing, then I'm like, okay, why am I overing? What under am I
Mhm.
feeling? And then the seed that starts all of this is you can recognize if you're doing things by overing. And then you go, okay, why am I overing? What under am I feeling? And underneath the under is what I call the uns. And the human needs, it all comes down to like human needs. But if we feel unloved, unwanted, unimportant, unheard, unseen, any of the uns, that makes us feel undered, and the unders make us over. So if you can spend time understanding those 3 points, you can get out of it real fast.
Okay, so is it if I can use the words being as in state and then doing as in doing something, the
Yes.
unders are very much the state, of being that you might be feeling in moments, undervalued, and then the doing is that I have to overdo this, over that, overwork, over, right?
Yes,
So there's a
ma'am.
being and doing feel in that for me.
Yes, no, you nailed it. And that's a great way to help the listeners like understand it too. Yeah. So one's a state of being, I feel this way.
Yes.
And then because I feel this way, I do this to try to solve
Yeah.
it. But that doing actually um, can lead to further damage, and it does.
Yes.
So
Okay.
So level three, like, so let's just say, you're at work and you've been there 5 years and Sally got promoted and she's only been there 1 year, right? And you're like, oh my God, I have been here 5 years. I can't believe Sally got promoted. And so then you start feeling, then there's that state of being where you start feeling undervalued, under-recognized. And so you start over and you're like, well, I'm going to show them that they made a mistake. Like some people do this out of rebellion. So I use that as a funny example. But, you start working harder, you start overthinking things, analyzing things, start maybe putting stuff on spreadsheets and like trying to figure everything out. And in that state, you stay in that a little bit too long. Let's fast forward 3 months. You're still overdoing it,
Mhm.
right? And then that's going to put you in a state of starting to question your belonging when that overing goes un unaddressed, right? By whoever that person you're doing it subconsciously, but you're doing it because you want someone to see
Yes.
you. And when
Yes.
you go unseen, then you start questioning your belonging. So I think all of us have had that question. Should I stay? Should I go? Is this relationship for me? Is this job for me?
Mm.
And so that's an active state where you are really starting to get into your unpotential and burnout will take root. And if you don't honor that questioning and solve that situation, then the next two levels, level four is disharmony in the bodies. And as a soulful one, you'll understand this. Our physical, emotional, spiritual, financial state, mental space, they all get in disharmony. And you'll notice your body probably first by the clenching of the teeth, the
Mm.
tension in neck and shoulders, maybe lower back pain. Your body's going to start talking real fast. And then we bypass that, but then we start losing hope or we start going into depression, anxiety, overwhelm. If that state is stayed in too long, then you go into what I call devastation of the D's. And this is what happened to my parents. And this is what happened to me when I hit the bathroom floor. And that would be, at devastation of the D's, this is when you see people go through divorce, extreme disconnection in relationships, drinking, drugs, even if it's prescribed. I'm not just talking recreational stuff. I'm talking,
Mhm.
all the prescription medicines to handle the anxieties and everything. And then disease. Disease is on a rise, especially amongst working professionals. And I ended up with autoimmune disease. Autoimmune disease in women is like sky high increasing. And and then there's death, which is why I said, like, I feel like if my parents had some of these practical tools, they might still be alive today. And lucky
Mm.
enough, I was able to figure out this in my own head, heal myself, and now use this to heal other people. But that's the full expression of unpotential, in my opinion, and how it leads to burnout.
Right. So we have the unders, the overs. Was level three questioning? Is that the
Yeah,
questioning
questioning. Yep.
piece? And then level four, disharmony in the body.
Yep.
And then level five,
Devastation of the D's.
devastation of the D's. That's five. Okay, that got it. That's really, I love this. My soul is dancing.
It's like, this makes
It's just
sense.
again, just like, yes, okay, making sense of things that can feel so, like I don't get it. And it's like, well, take a moment, pause, and let's put something practical in place. And so the question following this would be, what are some of the things that people can do in this pyramid, in these five levels, to, like, and you said, like, knowing, not necessarily knowing where they are, because I think you've explained that beautifully and clearly, but maybe how they can move away from some of these steps,
Yes.
move through the steps.
And I talk a lot I mean, the whole book is kind of designed to progressionally rise you back to your radiance. But when you are in level three or higher, what's going to help you is basic work, boundaries, making
That's
powerful choices. It's hard work, but I say basic because I feel like it's a necessity to thrive.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
and so that's where I always start is helping people understand their choices. And then I talk about boundaries. So from a choice perspective, they talk a lot about it in Gary, Seed of the Soul. He
Mhm.
kind of uses an analogy about this, but our choices he often says our choices can empower or disempower us. And that from a soul perspective, there's really only two paths. You either empower your soul or you disempower your soul. And
Yeah.
then, I'm also much more cognitive too and bring us into this human experience. And so I like to say that our decisions also serve us or sabotage us. And so if
Yeah.
your choices can be more conscious and if you can think about choices only having two paths rather than 11, say, it simplifies the choice and you can start making choices that serve you. And as you do, you get more time, you get more energy, you get more space. And in that, you can break away from the symptoms of the unpotential. And then also I go right after that is boundaries. So it's like learning choice, I think is really important first, and then boundaries. The only thing I want to say before I give it back to you is the biggest, baddest boundary you could ever set is the one between you and yourself. You can't control other people, but the more you say yes to everything else, like in that description that I was giving in the opening, when I said yes to my kids, yes to my husband, yes to work, I was saying no to myself. And who is violating those boundaries? This girl. Yeah,
Mhm.
this girl. So it's really important to realize that you have a lot more control. And that's that CEO piece. It's like it's
Yeah.
hard to boss up, but it's empowering as hell too. Like you start
Yep.
making those more powerful choices, you start putting in boundaries and saying yes to yourself, and then you can get yourself out of that unpotential pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's great. While you were speaking earlier, something was coming up that was underlying for me that I wanted to speak about. And then when you brought boundaries in, it felt like it cemented why that came up. When I teach about boundaries, I talk about them being closely linked to our self-worth. So I would
Yes.
love your take on boundaries or the worthiness piece that will underlie a lot of what you're talking about in your work. For example, I had someone say, when I set a boundary though, or if I say no, I often feel selfish, or that's the reflection that I get from people. And I said, great, then be selfish, because what you're saying is, I'm choosing me. And that's my time and that's my choice. And that's okay if someone doesn't understand or not. And also, as you said, that responsibility piece that when we're upset or angry that a boundary's been crossed, it's at ourselves for allowing someone to cross the boundary because it's our responsibility. So I'd love you to delve a little deeper into that worthiness piece and the boundaries and how we can bring that more at the forefront of our choices.
I would love to, and I really love the story that you shared of like how you have responded to it and how you think of it because I'm in full alignment with that. I believe that we were born inherently worthy of health, or of the full expression of health, wealth, happiness, success. And the journey of this human experience is to believe that we are.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, by the time we get adults, most of us are no longer in alignment with, oh, we're inherently worthy of it all. We feel that we have to earn it. And
Mhm.
so the moment that you start trying to earn it or prove it, you're disconnected from that inherent worthiness. And so what that means in simple terms is your self-worth has been impacted. Because if your self-worth was intact in its fullest expression, you would have no problem saying no because you're like, I am worth more than say overextending myself. And it's not saying you're better than anybody else. It's really honoring your soul, your energy, and just being like, I I want to backtrack because I get this a lot in my work, and I'm sure you do too. But listen, especially spiritual entrepreneurs, and I would say leaders in corporate life too, they're impact based, they're mission based, they have purpose. And so there's a big calling. So they just want to serve. And so it feels counterintuitive. And if you're listening and you're like, yes, this does feel counterintuitive, I want you to know it's normal, but it's so important to push past that uncomfort because it's going to feel counterintuitive to say no. So that
Mm.
no to someone else or no to a project or reinforcing a fee when you could do it for free. I see a lot of my spiritual friends give their services away, and I'm like, no, don't do that. Um, but all when we give our services away for free, we leak out our personal power. We lower our self-worth. When we are saying yes to everyone except for ourselves, we are lowering our power and saying no to our self-worth. So just consider flipping that script and what would happen if you said yes to you? What if you said yes to keeping your fees high? What if you said yes to yourself and no to other people? How would that change your life? And that will get you in alignment with your inherent worth, is what you're talking about. So I'd love to hear what you have to say about that, but that's my opinion on it.
Oh, I resonate with it completely. And I can hear that that's what you were saying in some of what you said before, which is why I wanted to pull it out. I am so excited because I have to share this. I share this podcast with my entire community, and I'm going to pinpoint it to those who I just spoke to in my workshop, because you're just reiterating and reminding and remembering, helping them to remember all of this that we just spoke about. And I'm just like, yes, that's beautiful. They're going to have
I love that.
extra support. I absolutely love it. And so I have a question about the worthy piece, because I love and agree that we are inherently worthy, and there is this okay, you're trying to prove your worth takes you away from the inherence or the sovereignty of knowing this. What are some of the steps, or even if it's just one tip that you can suggest for someone who feels, okay, I I do want to honor that. I do want to honor my worth. What's the first step? Let's say, what's the second step? Boundaries, setting boundaries, maybe
Yes.
focus setting boundaries. What's next for them to actually really go in and go, you know what? Yeah, I am worthy of this.
Something that's just coming up for me, and I think it's chapter 12 in the book, but faith. I think that's such an important element. My grandma she was, a religious woman, but she was very faithful when I was growing up. And in the book, I share a story. I was 5, like,
Mm.
and she asked me to hold out my hand. And I hold up my hand, and I really thought she was going to give me one of her strawberry candies. And I was like, "Yes, come on." But what she did instead is she put a mustard seed in my hand and told me, she's like, "Becca Ann, all you need is faith the size of a mustard seed." And I'm just not talking about God. I'm talking about faith in yourself.
Mhm.
And what I have found about faith, and I tear saying it, is it's such a beautiful thing. Like, we have faith in gravity, we have faith in other things, but when it comes to faith in ourselves, we question it. And
Mm.
I say a lot of invitation, but there's an invitation to have faith in yourself, have faith that you are radiant. And going back to, what is radiance? One part you, one part your soul, one part infinite intelligence. What if you had faith that that design was working for you rather than against you? I get the goosebumps too, and I get teary, but
Mm.
like, what if your faith was in that and not necessarily something else? But if you had faith in your radiance to serve you, it would greatly impact your worthiness.
Yeah, beautiful. I love that. Ah, let that land. That is
Hmm.
so beautiful. And what I particularly enjoy in that share, thank you, Grandma, for sharing,
Yeah.
is that, sometimes, again, coming back to that being and doing, where often
Yes.
when we're in the state of, whether it's burnout, stress, the world is always do, push, get, go. And we sometimes forget the being state. And again, it comes back to that balance of just allowing yourself to be your, who you truly are, the authentic you, the allow, surrender. And that faith
Love
piece
that.
for me is when you are in when you can allow yourself to be in the frequency of that, the ripple effects are endless. And then you can be aware and notice the things that start to change in your life without having to do it or do that, but allowing yourself to
Yes.
be and let that ripple out. It's so beautiful.
It's so beautiful. And I'm like celebrating as you're saying that because, that's it. We're human beings, not
Mm.
human doings, right?
Yes.
There, it's even in in what we're called, we're human beings. And what blew my mind, Simone, and this is just as I was healing, and I had to get back to being because the doing almost hospitalized me. By the time I hit the bathroom floor, I had autoimmune disease. I was diagnosed with chronic stress, chronic fatigue, two anxiety disorders. My hair was even falling out in clumps. Like I was in rough shape, and I was like, I can't do another thing. I would literally end up in the hospital. Like my doctors were like, you basically need like 2 weeks of bed rest just to even like, and I couldn't do that. But anyway, I digress. My point is that what blew my mind is as I started coming back to my beingness, I enrolled in Kundalini teacher training, and that really helped. But everything I was chasing started coming as a result of me being rather than doing. So as I got, I left that job, I got a job that felt in alignment with me and I was having a lot of fun. It was in my strengths, in my talents, in my gifts. So now I'm in natural expression of myself again.
Mm.
And I doubled my income. I wasn't trying to. It just happened. And so it goes, this is that spiritual alignment piece that you get aligned with what I call your radiance. Pretty much everything that you've been chasing starts to show up as a
Mm.
result of. And so I
Yeah.
love that that's kind of what you were saying too.
Yes, that's so beautiful. And I'm curious now, because you mentioned you're a mother of four.
Hmm.
Yes. Okay. I'm a mother of three, so I know I've
Hey.
kids as well. And mine are much older, but they would have seen, obviously, they see us grow up as they're growing up.
Yeah, mine are in college now too.
Yes. And so I'm curious now, like now, obviously you've been through that, your own healing, you're helping and sharing. If you do know, how has it impacted your kids by default or with that ripple effect that we're talking about, whether it
No,
was,
it's
sounded to you or not?
Yeah, no, it's beautiful and I'm really glad you asked that question because I think that we end up making more of an impact and creating the legacy that we want when we start being that thing that we want. So by me bringing it all back to me, um, showed them so many things. My actions taught them more than my words did.
Absolutely.
And so now they will say things like I really, they're in college and things like that, like I need to be in a job that's in alignment with my strengths and gifts. I need to, they're like, oh, they'll say things like I need to put these boundaries in place, but I need to explain to the person that I need to be able to have my energy and have my stuff so that I can get done and so it's just like it's
Beautiful.
cool hearing little tidbits when it comes out, sideways and just
Yes.
in conversations, but it is definitely very present. And I feel that they're much just healthier and happier too. Like I think as moms, um, and then as parents, but as moms, we are the ones showing them the way again through our
Yes,
actions and
for
less through
sure.
our words. And that's the part that makes me tear up is because I can see them have healthier regulation of their emotions. I can see that they're more contemplative making decisions. And these are the things that I've always wanted to teach them, but I ended up teaching it through myself and my
Yes.
learning.
Well, as you said, they will learn much more from how we show up than what we say. And I
Yes.
absolutely appreciate that. I remember when my youngest, who's 18 soon, when he was maybe about 8 or 9, often when children come around, adults are like, so what do you want to be when you grow up? It's a question that often
Oh,
children get
yes.
asked. And his response was happy. And I couldn't be prouder of that response. I really was like, Becca, I was like, if at 8 you already know that that's what you want to be when you grow up, hats off to
Yes.
you. That is absolutely beautiful, because anything else that you then do with the framework of I want to be happy, it's already, you know, giving a beautiful perspective and lens on life. So I was really,
Yes.
really proud of that. And I love to share that. And I know that you speak about the kind of meaning or assignment that you give things and how it can change perspective. As I say that, there's a lovely segue into talking a little bit about that. Could
Yeah.
you give me an example of that for you, that powerful way to shift our perspective by the meaning that we assign or give something?
Absolutely. And, I shared earlier that I've experienced a lot of traumatic loss. And, I could spend the rest of my life in the sads and depressed, and people would probably let me off the hook and be like, whoa, she lost both of her parents by 35. My brother also passed away in March, and
Mm.
very traumatically and unexpectedly. And so I say all these things because the meaning I assign to things is very important, and the meaning you assign to things are very important, listeners, because we have that going back to being the CEO of our lives. We have the ability to choose the meaning when
Yes.
we don't think we do. So, for an example, when my brother passed, so someone had asked me, um, are you doing okay with your brother gone? And I said, my brother's not gone. And they're looking at me like I'm crazy. And I said, my brother transitioned. He's still with me every day. And so
Mm.
that's an example. I could have a meaning saying that my brother's gone and that my mom and dad are gone. And then that meaning would mean that I no longer have a connection with them. They're gone. And
Mm.
if that's the meaning I assign to it, then that would leave me feeling very empty, very lonely, and very much on my own. Instead, I choose to say, they're not gone. They've transitioned, and I feel their presence every single day. I see them in the signs. I hear them in the music. I know when I'm making a decision, I see a swarm of dragonflies. Like, because I have chosen to see or to choose the meaning of, this
Yeah.
is just an example of transition versus gone, I get
Mhm.
to see them every day.
Yeah, that's so beautiful.
Thank you.
That's so beautiful. And I think that's such a wonderful example. Thank you for sharing something so personal. It's
Yeah,
really
you're welcome.
inspiring. And my mom used to work first. Her first work as a nurse was as a midwife, and then her retiring work as a nurse was in palliative care. So she often
Oh,
brought babies into the world, and then she watched people transition. And one of the things that she spoke about, which I thought was really interesting, is that we might say they're in transition when they're, in that stage, the last stages of life or the first stages of death, whichever way you want to look at it. And so then it feels right to say they've transitioned at the end of the transitioning. And
yes.
in a way, our whole life is a transition. We come in and have all these experiences and explore and evolve and so on, and then we've transitioned. I completely relate to that way of looking at it, and I can see how much peace
Yeah,
that can bring. So I really hope for anyone listening that may be going through either grief or anything that's hard or difficult, that they can shift their perspective, because it really makes a difference.
it really
Thank
does.
you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you. So not necessarily from your book, but I know in your work, and your last name embodies this, the power method that you talk about.
Yes.
I really like breaking things down the way you do. And I want to talk a little bit about the power method. So I've kind of written it down in front of me because I wanted to speak it out and then
Yeah,
have
let's
you
do it.
speak to it in whatever way you want to. So the power, P, protect your potential. O, own your opportunities. W, waken your worthiness. What? E, elevate your energy. Yes. And R, rock your radiance. Please talk to me about that. Oh my
Yes.
gosh.
So I think we've talked a lot about protecting the potential, and that's really where it starts. So we spent the beginning there. And
Yes.
own your opportunities is very similar in the sense of, like we just talked about, meaning. It's about understanding your values. And, that's, I'm not gonna totally double click on values, but I do want to share for the listeners,
Yeah.
knowing and aligning to your values is a game changer because values have two sides. They have a shadow side and a light side. And if you don't know your values, especially in people who have servitude, passion, purpose, mission, um, it's normally because there's a value inside you that says that's important. Mine's meaningful work. Well, meaningful work, I placed above myself. So I chased meaningful work so hard that I collapsed on the bathroom floor. That wasn't a balanced approach to meaningful work. I'm just going to say, like, once I prioritized myself and did all the work of the P, I then started to own my opportunities. I started to realize that values I need to align to my values. I need to make sure that I'm prioritizing myself in them. And that allowed me to own my opportunities. I was able to change the, focus on the meaning of things, the values of things. And then as opportunities come in, you are ready to own them. You are ready to be like the victor. You're not in a victim state. So you're not sitting there, I talk a lot about doubt in that chapter. Like, hey, doubt's not knocking you down at your knees. It's just trying to keep you alive, by the way. You don't have to hate doubt, but you just got to
Yeah.
know, like it's just
What
trying to
is there
keep
to
you alive.
serve?
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's why I called it own your opportunities. And I feel like once you kind of get those things, protecting your potential, you're in a place where you could own your opportunities. Now you're ready to reconnect with that how we were talking about that inherent worthiness. You're in alignment to be like, yeah, baby, like I was born inherently worthy. I'm going to start going after things. I call them super big dreaming goals, but you start going after things that are more meaningful to you, that might be a little scary, but that totally jazz you up at the same time. And then we to go in to elevate your energy. And this is where the spiritual work is. This is, meditation, mantra, breath work, chakra work, all that stuff. Because once you can get the cognitive part in alignment and get back to that spiritual, like, hey, I'm worthy of a thriving life, then you got
Yes.
to work it. Like it just is what it is. And I love to have a lot of fun doing the spiritual work too. Most of us do. That's why we're in it.
Yeah.
But that's what the E is. Getting your spiritual practices in order to maintain, to give you the sustainable, healthy energy to
Yeah.
rock your radiance. And that's where you're leaving a legacy. That's where you're making an impact. That's when so
Boom.
yeah, you're committed to your dream. I mean, that's just, yeah, final expression.
That's so beautiful. I love it. And a lot of my approach, and I use the word the inside out approach in most things that I do. And I know you know what I mean.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
I think that that is what for me helps us, because I actually, the way you phrase that there's the light and shadow around the values, I've not heard it phrased that way before, and I really resonate with it. So the value is strong, but you can do one thing or the other. Again, those choices that you spoke about before that can actually either benefit and serve you or not. And I think that's a
Right.
really beautiful way to look at it.
Yes.
And so if we have this inside out approach, then it is, if the value is meaningful work, how can I think about meaning for myself, or what's the meaningful work within me that needs to be done, or however you want to phrase it, inside
Yes.
out always. And then the outer then again is that ripple effect, and then the choices that you make again in this material and three-dimensional expression of it.
Yeah, and I think that's like the confusing and also fun and exciting part about being a human is like figuring out all these, like the
Yeah.
mystery and the puzzle of everything. It's like I chased meaningful work for so long and ended up like having an emotional collapse. And then how you said an inside out approach, I started focusing on the meaningful work that I wanted to create, and which for me is very much writing and speaking. Those are my radiant gifts. And as
Yes.
I was just started to work on them from a place of, hey, this just brought me joy. There was no goal attached to it. Like I was like, I'm going to write a book. I would be happy if three people bought the book.
Absolutely.
There wasn't an intention to hit a bestseller list or, use it as a business card. And not that there's anything wrong with it. But what I am trying to say, to go off Simone's point, is that for me, I went into what felt more meaningful to me. And now, fast forward years later, I'm launching a return to radiance. It's the most meaningful work I've ever built. It's
Mm.
helping people change their trajectory. And, it might hit some bestseller list. We'll find out hopefully this week. But it's just the point of that. Yes, what you've said is so correct.
Yeah. And I think that's it. That's it though. Again, we can also aim for and set the intention for the bestseller list. It may not
Yes.
be the reason that we write the book, but we can also then go, well, what's the ripple effect or the external? I like to say the inner universe into the outer world.
Yes.
What's the outer world alignment piece? And if you're so radiant with this expression through writing, then what's that out in the world? Maybe it's the bestseller, right? And we can aim for those things.
Absolutely. And we should. Like, we should have fun
Absolutely.
with expressing our, like what I call our, like how you said, our radiance. Like, we should have fun and have big goals surrounding our gifts and talents. And um yeah, so I just wanted to reinforce that. Yes. So, yes.
So I have one more question about a chapter in your book because I really think this is such an interesting title. Bear hug uncomfortable. Nate, that's one of your chapters. Talk to me, and it's about navigating change. Tell us about bear hug uncomfortable. It's so fun.
Oh, yeah, well, one of the things that actually came from one of my video coach who I have one because it's the element that is the most uncomfortable for me. And I can write posts, I can do stuff, but me going doing like video shorts, I'm getting better at. But anyway, but she had told me once to bear hug uncomfortable, and it just hit me like upside the head, and it made me realize that that was something that I had done in previous times, and even with my clients and stuff, when they really faced and like not just faced the uncomfortable, but like bear hugged it, like I'm
Mm.
going for it. Beautiful things happen. So I wanted to like unpack that a little bit. And what I really came to is that change is inevitable. There is one thing about being a human being, and every day is different than the
Mhm.
day before. And there's a lot of unexpected things that happen. I mean, on the dramatic and traumatic side, from, hurricanes we're seeing in the world right now to deaths that we have talked about to rising into your potential. That shit's scary. I'm sorry I dropped that as well. But
Drop it, drop
yeah,
it.
okay. I was like, I'm sorry, but that's just where I went. But it's scary. Like
Yeah.
now you have to be visible and you have to be all of the things that you were meant to be. What if people don't like you? What if,
Mm.
like all this stuff is coming, but your change is inevitable. Change is either going to be for the worse or for the better. So what if instead of being afraid of change and just trying to stay the same and trying to fit into the little box that you no longer fit in, what if you just bear hug the uncomfortable and we're like, all right, I'm going to embrace it. I'm going to get through it and I'm going to see what it gives me. And I thought it was a fun way of
Yeah.
addressing the unpredictability of change, but in a positive way.
Yeah, and what I particularly love about it is even though you are saying this, you didn't say you have to have courage and you have to be daring in the face of change and fear and all those things that we know. But the thought of a bear hug, if we take everything out of the equation and we just think bear hug, how awesome does that feel?
Yeah, like, yeah,
I
exactly. Like
know
you're,
I want the bear hug. I want, and so when you say bear hug uncomfortable, it's also bringing that element of, again, faith, support,
but
whether
it's
that's
almost
your,
like the
all of
uncomfortable's
that.
hugging you back, saying, I got
Oh
you,
my
girl.
gosh,
Like,
I
it's
got
okay.
you. That's
Yeah,
what I've got, that's what I got from it. I was like, okay, I'm gonna do it.
I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do
I'm
it.
gonna do
Yeah.
it. I know it's scary, but I'm gonna do it. So beautiful. I love, love,
Thank
love that.
you.
And I thought I definitely want to bring it up because it's not something, it's quite unique and very,
Yeah,
very
thank
beautiful,
you.
like you and your work, which is incredible. Which is incredible. Now, I mean, we could talk forever because really there's just so much
Oh
more
yeah.
I'm
I'm
sure I
like,
can.
can I come back on the show?
Yeah, I think we're gonna have a part two. I was saying that to a guest the other day, and I'm like, gosh, my podcast is just gonna be repeats of some of my guests because there's just too much that not too much, but so much that I want to
Much.
pull that, time
Yeah, I
is what
get
it
that.
is. But we will definitely make something happen, Becca, without a doubt, because there's just so much beautiful stuff in your work that I can't wait to share this episode. I'm so excited, and congratulations on your book.
Thank you.
Yay, celebrating that and just celebrating you in this moment and all the beautiful work you're doing to help people return to radiance. Because, gosh, we need that more than ever, especially right now in the world the way it
Uh,
is. So
I just got
important.
the goosebumps like head to toe.
Oh,
Yes.
so beautiful,
Mhm.
so beautiful. Now, of course, I will share all of your links and all the details with this episode. And I do like to ask my guests the same question at the end of the episode, and that is, what is your soulful sound to the world, which is a prayer or desire that you wish upon the world?
I wish that everyone knew how radiant they were and how much their radiance would actually be the thing that changed the world in a positive way.
Oh, yes.
I know, I like tears too.
Mm.
Mm.
Listen, people, you are radiant. Remember, remember. Thank you so much, Becca Powers. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for having me on.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for tuning in. Your support, your comments, and everything is truly incredible. And we're only at the beginning of this awesome journey together. If you love this episode, hit that like and subscribe button and make sure to check out our other episodes. Thanks so much for being with us today. Sending you love, healing, and sound wherever you are.